Martin Shkreli wore the title of the most hated man in America like a crown. He looked like an altar boy, but he had the heart of the devil, smug and arrogant. He felt no shame about his greedy business dealings. And like almost every evil man in history, he amassed a slew of hardcore fans that idolized him. But his cocky bravado was short-lived. Not even the richest or most baby-faced monsters can escape the law. He went from a high-balling big talker in a Wall Street suit right down to a sniveling orange jumpsuit wearing disgrace in the space of just a few months. How did the boy, from such humble beginnings, end up as one of the most vile snakes to ever step into medicine? Let's look into the life, fraud, and downfall of Martin Shkreli, the most hated man in America. Martin was born in the early 80s to immigrant parents. One of 4 children, Martin's early life wasn't glamorous at all. At best, the Shkreli family was lower middle class, since both his parents worked as janitors. But the Shkrelis always had food on the table, attended church, and all of the siblings could be counted in Sunday school every week. They were modest, hardworking, and inconspicuous. There are some accounts of physical violence in the home from time to time, but nothing so extreme that the authorities ever had to be called in. Martin proved himself to be a quiet and a rather gifted student. He liked math, chemistry, and he befriended an older man by the name of Marty that lived in his apartment building. Marty and Martin would play chess for hours, and Marty taught the boy about stock trading. To a budding mathematician, this was a game changer. Little Martin understood numbers and statistics, and where the stock market makes 0 sense to the rest of us. Martin immediately became engrossed by the field. Martin bought his first shares with his own pocket money at just 12 years old. He skipped 2 grades in high school, and though Martin was a bright student, he skipped out on classes so much that his attendance was virtually non-existent. So he dropped out at 16 to join an alternative program that allowed kids to finish high school with credits they earned from doing intern work. And it would be this shortcut that gave Martin a foot in the door of the trading world. He started working in the mailroom at a financial news site, and he had a habit of pointing out promising stock investments and sniffing out bad deals and scams, especially in the pharmaceutical business. The hedge fund company, Kramer and Berkowitz, saw the teenager's potential and hired him as an analyst. Martin made a good bit of cash by short-selling stocks in the pharma space, both for himself and CNB. He was so good at this hustle that the Securities and Exchange Commission even opened an investigation into the then 18-year-old, but they were unable to prove any illegalities. This was the first time that Martin Shkreli got a taste of what it was like to evade justice, and he sure liked the thrill of it. Martin spent the next few years getting his degree in business administration while hopping from firm to firm. He spent his time making money for his employers and making the right connections. He always had plans to start his own firm, and as soon as he had enough powerful people in his court and a track record of success behind him, he opened Aliyah Capital in 2006. And Martin stayed within the medical trading field that he knew best, but his startup nearly went up in flames. After making an investment, betting against another company's stocks to drop, Martin lost big. The company rose in value instead, and they took him to court. But in an unbelievably lucky turn of events, the company fell flat overnight and declared bankruptcy. The charges against Shkreli were left hanging, so he started another company, MSMB. This time, Martin wasn't going to rely on statistics and numbers to make predictions. He was going to force the stocks to fall in line with him instead. Martin spent his time online, trashing medical trials and pharma stocks. He showed up at medical conferences with the sole intention of driving distrust in new products just before they got approval by the FDA. The bigger the public spectacle he could cause, the bigger his chances of getting that medication to drop on the stock market and lose out on FDA approval entirely. When his influence and harassment got enough people to pull out of a new product and those companies' values dropped, MSMB would short sell those stocks and pocket the difference. MSMB was making big bank. For the next 3 years, Martin was hated by the pharmaceutical industry, but he was considered a genius by Wall Street. Despite all the money he was making, he still slept in his office, rarely bathed, and devoted every spare moment to MSMB. Shkreli was cutthroat. No matter who he brought down or how important the new drugs were to saving the lives of people, he would happily watch them burn to the ground if it made him a buck. And he was pretty active online too. Martin liked to leave commentary on stock trading sites and chip in with his expertise. Keep that in mind. Martin's online presence is going to be a big factor in his infamy a little later. But 2011 started to show some cracks for MSMB. Shkreli was becoming cocky, and he made a handful of bad calls that had the company go from an asset value of $1.2 million down to $60,000 in assets. MSMB was looking at going bankrupt with their rising debts, and when the debt collectors came knocking, Shkreli resorted to threats to get them to back down. Shkreli made it very well known that he knew some powerful people in the industry, and that he had a team of lawyers who would do the dirty work for him. But they were all empty threats. Sure, Shkreli was well known in the space, but the social recluse had very few friends. And to get his board members off his back, he faked MSMB's financial reports to convince his investors that they were making profits when they were actually staring down the bankruptcy barrel. He kept the ruse up until 2011. This is where Shkreli took an even darker turn. He opened up another company, but this time it wasn't a hedge fund. It was a bona fide pharmaceutical company called Retrophin. They specialized in making drugs for rare diseases. Just as he invested heavily into this new venture, MSMB took its biggest loss yet. Another bad prediction left them with $7 million in debt. So instead of letting MSMB shareholders know about the disaster, Shkreli falsified even more financial reports and covered their debts from Retrophin stocks. He was buying time, but it didn't take the FDA long to discover the outright fraud. And Shkreli was in hot water again. He got kicked from the board of Retrophin when the news of his criminal activities got leaked. While the investigation was ongoing, Shkreli founded yet another company in the pharmaceutical industry. Again, they specialized in rare diseases, and in order to fund this new company, Turing Pharmaceuticals, Shkreli bought up so many stocks in one very specific medication, Daraprim. So many stocks that he practically owned Daraprim outright. So why this specific drug? Well, it treated a very uncommon condition that usually affected AIDS patients. This isn't like aspirin that comes in hundreds of different brands and has a ton of investments or marketing attached to it. Daraprim has only one of its kind. There are no other generic brands to compete with. Its patient pool just isn't big enough to spark competition. But at the same time, those that do need Daraprim are utterly reliant on it to stay alive. Don't let its classification as a rare treatment fool you. Thousands of people in the US need Daraprim to live. Shkreli hiked the price from $13 to $750 per pill, and he did this overnight. That's where the title of the most hated man alive came from. The whole of the United States was in an uproar over Shkreli's actions. The hike served no other purpose than lining his own pockets, and that at the expense of terminally ill people who could no longer afford the medication that could save their lives. His justification was interesting to say the least, and his reasoning wasn't entirely wrong. This whole public mess was such a spectacle that even politicians got in on the action. The hike did inspire more research and medications to be developed to offer better targeted treatment than Daraprim did. But before those results ever saw the light of day, Shkreli just basked in the limelight. For him, any publicity was good publicity. The world threw its anger and hate at the pharma bro. Shkreli was the poster child for the greedy capitalists that were leeching the world dry to make themselves richer. Protests, internet warfare, death threats. Nothing could wipe the smile off Shkreli's face. He was unapologetic and pretentious through it all. If anything, he reveled in the attention. But Daraprim wasn't his downfall. All of those stocks he used to cover his debts and falsified financial reports were finally catching up to him. The FBI arrested Martin Shkreli for multiple accounts of securities fraud. He posted bail and was out of prison the next day, and then he jumped online, and he milked the limelight for all it was worth. Wall Street bets on Reddit wasn't a huge deal back then, with only a few thousand Redditors on it, and on his Twitch, where Shkreli streamed while playing online games, wasn't exactly popular either. But after his arrest, those places that he frequented blew up. Shkreli used his live streams to teach his viewers about stocks, trading, chemistry, and biotech. And say about Shkreli what you want, but no one can deny that he knows his stuff. Statistics and the hugely multifaceted field of pharma was what he knew, and he knew it well. Shkreli played at being professor for his viewers, and they ate it up, bringing a godlike reverence to his advice and teachings. So much so that Wall Street saw a 7% rise in the month after his arrest, when his fan base started taking his advice. The man was now a walking meme and an internet beast. He might have been known by the media as the most hated man in America, but he sure as hell was going to ride that label as hard as he could, taking every minute of airtime that he could get his hands on. On one hand, his trading teachings held a lot of weight. He proved himself to be a highly intelligent man more than once, after all. But his insufferable, smug arrogance made him even easier to hate than ever. And the attention drove Shkreli to invest millions on ridiculous options. Oh, he made a few million, but he also blew it all on rare records, cool gadgets, and overpriced champagne. For all of his genius, in the eyes of the world, Martin Shkreli was a spoiled teenager with too much money to spend. The whole court case was a debacle, and Shkreli made an enormous joke of the whole affair. And in 2017, he was finally sentenced to 7 years in prison for those fraud charges. A few $1 million worth of assets were seized from Shkreli, including his $2 million Wu-Tang Clan record. But not even prison could stop him. Shkreli managed to keep posting online through an outside source, and he mailed handwritten letters to the outside, keeping his reputation as a troll very much alive and well. He sued a couple of people. A few people sued him. Shkreli was having a ball behind bars, constantly moving in and out to appear in court. His antics eventually got him permanently banned from working in pharma ever again. And when his release from prison finally came around in 2022, he was back online with a tweet as he drove away from the jailhouse. And this is where his cult following went from God mode memes based in humor to a small group that genuinely respected Shkreli. He kept offering advice and lessons on the stock market and the science behind medical trails. And although his advice was actually pretty good, he couldn't completely shake his sneaky ways. He might have been banned from entering the pharma space, but nothing could stop him from getting into crypto. In the first few months of his new currency's launch, it skyrocketed in sales before plummeting to the ground overnight. It looked like Shkreli was up to his old short sale tricks again. But Shkreli claims that he was hacked, and there's no evidence to prove otherwise. Besides his crypto endeavors, he's also dabbling in making a better version of WebMD, a database that can diagnose users based on their symptoms with the use of AI. And he's got a YouTube channel that is doing pretty well, where he gives commentary and lessons on the stock trade. And you can always count on Martin Shkreli to troll the public whenever the opportunity arises. Old habits die hard, after all. Once a troll, always a troll. Is Martin Shkreli really the devil? Or is he just an opportunist with a taste for the dramatic? His understanding of the pharmaceutical field is undeniable, but his intelligence does not equate to wisdom. And if there's one thing that Shkreli surely is, is that he's a fool for attention. Let us know what you think in the comments below, or tell us about some of the biggest financial scandals you'd like to see us cover. Make sure to leave a like before you leave, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any new uploads. Cheers!